Hello, this is the first video installment on the Catholic epistles. There are 7 Catholic epistles. They include James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and Jude. There are 7 in all. The term Catholic is usually written with a small c because this isn't referring to the denomination, the Catholic denomination, but it basically means universal. So it's Catholic in the sense of universal rather than the Catholic Church. Although some of these 7 epistles are addressed to individuals, early on they were thought to be edifying for the entire church, the entirety of Christendom. And so whether they're addressed to an individual or not, they're called general epistles as well as Catholic epistles. Essentially universal epistles if they use Catholic epistles, or general epistles, which is sort of a more modern way of rendering the phrase Catholic epistles. These were not necessarily addressed to specific congregations, but thought to be applicable to the church at large. In the course of the history of New Testament studies and forming the New Testament into a book of Scripture, these 7 letters did not always appear at the same place in Bibles in every Bible version. For example, the church father Athanasius puts these 7 books after the book of Acts, but before the Pauline epistles. In fact, almost all of the ancient church fathers and the ancient copies of the Bibles themselves that we have inserted these letters before Paul's writings, not after them. They end up after Paul's writings finally in a version of the Bible called the Vulgate, V-U-L-G-A-T-E. The Vulgate is the first 4th century translation of the Bible from Greek into Latin, and it's called Vulgate because it comes from the word vulgar, or the common or ordinary language of the people of that time period. The Vulgate was thought to have been translated by Jerome. And some of these letters are not necessarily really letters, but they're missing some of the parts of letters. Yesterday you worked on a PowerPoint presentation on James, so we're not going to cover that here, but we are now going to turn to each of the other general epistles briefly. First up is the book of Jude. Even though it is the last book in the canon, I wanted to mention it first because it has a relationship to some of the subsequent books that is highlighted if we speak about Jude first. Jude is often thought to be a tract rather than a letter proper, despite the fact that it has epistolary conventions. These letter parts to the book of Jude are often thought to have been later additions or interpolations. The problem addressed in the letter of Jude involves false teachers. These people who are false teachers reject the moral authority of Christ and engage in immoral behavior. They were thought not to originally been part of the community, but to have come into the community from somewhere outside of it. One scholar I read indicated they might be itinerant preachers of some sort. As far as author, well, Jude was a very common name. It was derived from the name Judah, which was one of the tribes of Israel. In the New Testament, there are at least 8 different people with the name Jude, Judah, Judas, all of which are derived or derivatives of or related to Jude. So we don't know exactly who supposedly wrote the letter. Date? Well, it's pretty much anyone's guess. Scholars have various theories on this and have posited everything from 50 CE to 80 CE. A unique aspect of the book of Jude is its midrashic style. Now, a midrash is a type of Jewish exegesis. And what happens is they refer to or allude to an Old Testament text, which then becomes interpreted. Now, Jude doesn't quote any Old Testament text directly, but it does, in passing, mention people like Cain, and it mentions the Exodus event and just a whole host of other things in a few very short verses. And then it tries to draw out what the implications of those scriptural allusions are for its own community. So that is midrashic interpretation. Another unique aspect of Jude is it is the one book of the Old Testament to quote directly from a non-canonical book. There is a class of documents called the Old Testament pseudepigrapha. Now, we've already learned the word pseudepigrapha means false superscription, and it can be applied to any number of documents, such as some of the Deutero-Pauline letters. But the Old Testament pseudepigrapha is actually a collection of writings about Old Testament figures. They were very popular in the first century BCE, the first and second century CE. So to actually see one quoted here in Jude is pretty interesting. It tells the esteem in which these particular group of books, the Old Testament pseudepigrapha, were held. The particular book that is quoted is First Enoch, which is an apocalypse, and it quotes verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 9 of First Enoch. There is a later phrase in the book of Jude that may reflect another Old Testament pseudepigrapha writing called the Testament of Moses. Now, when they talk about testaments, they're actually talking about last will and testament. It's a type of genre where when some Old Testament figure or a person dies on their deathbed, they leave advice and present a farewell to others. So a testament is this particular genre. It's the testament in the last will and testament and farewell that someone is writing. Now let's turn to the Epistles of Peter, 1 Peter and 2 Peter. They're called 1st and 2nd Peter simply because in the letter that is known as 2 Peter, the author of that epistle indicates in the text that this is the second letter. So that's how we get the designations 1 Peter and 2 Peter. Both 1st and 2 Peter are thought to be pseudepigraphic, that Peter's name was assigned to them after they had been written. And the reasons why this is are pretty complex. One reason would be that 1 Peter describes Jesus as the rock and Jesus as the shepherd of the flock, while we know in the Gospels Peter, Petros, is the rock, and Peter, after Jesus dies, is supposed to be the shepherd of the continuing flock of and taking care of the church. So there's this sort of role reversal, and it is thought that if Peter had really written these letters, then Peter wouldn't have assigned someone else the duties that were assigned to him. 1 Peter is thought to have been written to address an audience outside of the Roman Empire. There is mention of the place Babylon, and it is thought to have been written at a time of persecution, but scholars haven't been able to nail down any particular Roman Empire type persecution or any type of historical circumstance where they can actually plug this letter in and say, this was the period of time where this persecution was happening and this is what this letter is addressing. We haven't been able to do that at all. All we know is traditionally it's associated with a time of persecution. The main theological theme of 1 Peter is that Christian discipleship is a journey, that Christians develop, that they move through faith issues, that there is a sense of journey. In a way, Pilgrim's Progress, if you've ever read that particular piece of Christian inspirational fiction, has a lot of themes that it may have drawn from 1 Peter. 2 Peter is sometimes described as a testament, and we've already talked a little bit about testament earlier. A testament is where a figure approaching death provides final teaching and offers a farewell. 2 Peter is thought to have been written after Jude, and possibly even used the letter of Jude as a source. Or other scholars hypothesize that Jude and Peter both were using the same source. Thank you. We'll continue with the general epistles in the next video.